I've heard this argument made many times. It's often made in Israel. If we wanted to carry out a genocide, it is said, of the Palestinians in Gaza, we could have killed 1 million of them. But we didn't. And therefore, it's not a genocide. I should say that I tried in this article to be as judicious and as measured and as factual as possible. People who will never recover from what happened, and particularly children who've been deprived of food now for a very long time, who will not develop properly, even if they survive all this violence, as one of the preconditions of genocide, that you refer to the group that you want to destroy as not human. Civilians who are being brought from Israel, their ads calling for operators of heavy machinery to come to Gaza to get well paid, and then they are paid by the house. They come in and they destroy houses.
Assalamu alaikum and peace. Welcome to Mujahid Talk at Muslim Network TV. You can always watch Muslim Network at Galaxy 19 Satellite, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Samsung Tizen, and your own app on your smart or not so smart phone. And always on muslimnetwork.tv. Today, my guest is Omer Bartov. Is a Dean's Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at the Department of History and Faculty Fellow at Watson Institute of International and Public Affairs at Brown University. He is an Israeli-born historian who has served in the Israeli military and has taken a stand that his home country's conduct in Gaza constitute genocide. Before we begin our conversation, I would like us to go to Gaza through some images which I saw this morning. This is Fatima Hijazi. She's mother of a 10-year-old Palestinian, Mustafa. They are in Deir al-Bala in Gaza. He died. There was no food and no medicine for Mustafa in the hands of Mother Fatima. And this image is just from a couple of days ago. This is Rahil Muhammad Rassas. She's a 32-year-old Palestinian woman on a hospital bed in Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunus, Gaza. Her body weight is just 50 pounds. That's all. 50 pound, a 32-year-old. And this is Muhammad Zakaria Ayub. His 1.5-year-old child in Gaza City. The photo was taken by Ahmad Jihad. I hope he's doing okay. Many journalists and photographers are saying they are no longer able to stand up, much less work. This photo was taken July 21st. His weight is dropped to just 12 pounds. I hope he is still alive in his tent where there is no milk or no food. The United Nations says that just a couple of miles from Gaza, they have enough food to feed 2 million Palestinians for 3 months. So food supply is not a problem. Food is available. Muslim Americans have raised millions and millions of dollars, which our relief organizations are unable to take it to Gaza. And of course, people are looking to food, desperate, walking miles. At this moment only, there are 4 points of food distribution in Gaza. United Nations used to have 400 points. And 4 points are in control of Israeli soldiers and American contractors. And they are often open just for a couple of minutes before they run out of food or they stop serving food. So people are desperate, trying to look at the faces of these children and women. They already look as though they have been hungry for a while. And some children are too far, cannot get to miles, walking miles for a food center. So they just look into the garbage and muddy places to rescue whatever is edible today. So this is Gaza today. And these people were simply gunned down by Israelis while standing in line for food. Their funeral prayer is taking place. And of course, some have lost struggle for food to survive. Here are some Palestinian journalists and photographers who can still stand on their feet with a message reading, Gaza is starving, stop attacks, and we appeal to the world's conscious. World's conscious? Is anyone listening to them? 185 confirmed deaths of journalists killed by Israel. Some are there, some are tweeting, I am no longer able to stand on my feet. AFP says they have been covering wars since 1944 and said they have never found journalists dying because of hunger. They have found journalists, of course, dead, killed, in prison, beaten, injured, but not dying because of hunger. So this French agency is appealing Israel to allow to take their journalist out of Gaza. Occupation, apartheid, genocide, and now famine in its final stage. Professor Omer Bartov, welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thanks for having me.
I read your articles in the New York Times. I was surprised that they printed it and willing to have this debate. And I saw this morning somebody giving a rebuttal of it. But has it resulted in some conversation in America?
Yes, I think the article received a great deal of response, some negative, some positive, critical, but I think it added to a debate. I should say that I tried in this article to be as judicious and as measured and as factual as possible, so as to actually open up this debate to this kind of reasonable conversation rather than people hurling accusations at each other. So obviously some of the responses have been, more ad hominem. I don't pay much attention to that, but I think there is more. Several other media outlets have asked to speak with me or have circulated this piece, and I'm always happy to talk about it. I should say that I think there is room for a debate over whether what we are seeing in Gaza is genocide or not. I think it is. I know that there's some scholars and legal experts who would argue with that, but there is no argument that what we are seeing in Gaza right now is a whole series of atrocities, war crimes, massacres, and crimes against humanity. On that, there's by now almost no debate whatsoever. I stress the issue of genocide because, as we can talk about, that has several important implications beyond simply using the term in terms of international law, international relations, and involvement of other powers in trying to put an end to the slaughter.
You initially did not consider what is happening to be a genocide. But by May 2024, as you say, you changed your mind. What made you change your mind?
So yes, I was. I took my time to adjudicate for myself whether this what we're seeing is genocide or not. Because first, it's a very complex definition. Secondly, it's a major allegation. If you make it, you should be judicious in doing so. And third, because it was, as it remains, not always easy to get all the facts. By May of 2024, I concluded that there was no other way to describe what Israel was doing but a genocidal operation in Gaza, because it appeared to me that the war goals that had been declared by Israel in October, which were to release the hostages. At the time, there were about 250 hostages in Gaza in the hands of Hamas and other organizations, and to destroy Hamas, were not actually the real war goal. And by May, that became increasingly clear that the main intention of the operation in Gaza was, in fact, to make it uninhabitable for its population by removing the population repeatedly from one place to another and then destroying those areas and gradually trying to push the population down south to the area of the Egyptian border with the goal of removing it entirely from the Gaza Strip. So you could say that this was an attempt at ethnic cleansing, not a term that is recognized as such in international law, so more like forcible displacement, but carried out in an extremely violent and destructive manner. And because people could not leave the Gaza Strip, they can't go anywhere else. As has happened often in the past, attempts to remove an ethnic group end up in its genocide.
A New York Times columnist, Bret Stephens, it seems in your response, is saying, I quote, in short, the first question the anti-Israel genocide chorus needs to answer is, why isn't the death count higher? Mm-hmm. What it got to do with higher death count or lower death count, and what is the death count which will account to be considered a genocide?
That's a very good question. I've heard this argument made many times. It's often made in Israel. If we wanted to carry out a genocide, it is said, of the Palestinians in Gaza, we could have killed 1 million of them, but we didn't. And therefore, it's not a genocide. We've only killed, by now, the most conservative estimate would be about 60,000, but it's probably more than 100,000 who were directly killed, with well over 140,000 who were wounded, with vast numbers of other people, thousands of people buried under the debris, people who will never recover from what happened, and particularly children who've been deprived of food now for a very long time, who will not develop properly, even if they survive all this violence. So what is the number that you need to call it genocide? The number of civilians or the number of individuals who've been killed in Gaza by now is anywhere between 2% and 5% of the population. Genocide is not, as if one looks at the definition, and I don't think that Bret Stephens did that. If you look at the definition of genocide, it is the attempt to, or actions carried out with the intent of destroying a particular group, ethnic, national, racial, or religious group, in whole or in part, as such. So what the Genocide Convention defines is an attempt to destroy a group. It isn't to kill all its members, and you can try to destroy that group in a variety of ways, and that's usually what happens in genocide, by killing them, by creating conditions that make it extremely difficult for them to survive, by depriving them of food, by depriving them of water, of medical assistance, by debilitating them physically and psychologically, by making births impossible or much more difficult. All of this has been happening in Gaza on a vast scale. So to sit back and to say that we need to wait until, let's say, 500,000, maybe 1 million people are certified as dead in order to define that as genocide, that has got nothing to do with the Genocide Convention, quite apart from the fact that it's an astoundingly inhumane manner of observing the reality on the ground. The final thing I'll say is on the question of intent, because intent is often difficult to establish. And in order to establish that this is genocide and not, so to speak, only crimes against humanity, you need to show that these actions are being carried out with the intent of destroying the group as such, not just because people don't care about the lives of the other group. There's an intent to destroy it. And curiously, in the Israeli case, that intent has been consistently expressed by politicians, by army people from the very beginning, from already on October 7th, going forward in a variety of ways of saying that Gaza has to be flattened, that the people there are human animals, that they will have no water, that they will have no food. And even just today, one Israeli minister said that Gaza will be flattened, that it will become Jewish, and that there is nothing to stop that from happening. That's an extraordinary statement that was made by a member of the Israeli government. So these statements are ongoing. They're all statements of intent to destroy the Palestinians as a group in Gaza.
Professor, why Israel, who is defending that it's not genocide and saying, as you mentioned, if we wanted to kill, we could have bombed everybody, but we announced beforehand that we're going to bomb so you can move out. So they're claiming to be considerate at the same time and using this as an argument that it's not a genocide. Why they are being this considerate if they have to destroy the whole people?
Well, Israel, as you know, cannot operate on its own. Israel is a relatively small country. It depends greatly on supplies of munitions and arms from other countries, particularly the United States, but also Germany, France, Britain, other European countries. It's economically very closely tied to the EU. It needs a diplomatic Iron Dome by the United States and often by other military allies in Western Europe. So in order to keep receiving this kind of support, Israel has always tried to present itself as the only democracy in the Middle East, to speak about the IDF as the most moral army in the world, to say that every action they carry out is according to international law. And it does that for external consumption. Everybody knows, of course, in Israel that is not the case. That is the IDF claims, for instance, to warn people before it attacks. So first of all, it doesn't always do it. It often doesn't do it at all. There were many attacks. There were scores of attacks on safe zones, say on the Mawasi area, scores of attacks by Israeli aircraft without any forewarning whatsoever. But in the cases where there is a warning, often what happens is that people don't know where to go. The information is very mixed, and when they move, both the roads on which they are told to move are attacked, and then the areas that they arrive to as safe zones are also attacked. And as I said before, the goal is not the declared goal that we are doing this in order to protect the population from an area that will become an area of combat, but rather, once the population leaves, that area is flattened so that people cannot come back to it. There's nothing to go back to. There's no infrastructure. There are no houses. There's no power. There's no water. Everything has been flattened. I actually reached my conclusion that this was a genocidal operation in May, because in May, the IDF moved into Rafah. And in Rafah, there were 1 million people. The majority of them people had been displaced already several times by the IDF, saying to them, go to another safe zone and another safe zone. And then the IDF moved into Rafah, and it moved those million people to the beach area where there was no infrastructure whatsoever, to the Mawasi, and then completely destroyed Rafah. There's nothing standing there. So this is not an attempt to protect the population. It's an attempt to destroy Gaza. Now, Deir al-Balah, which is the only place that was still half standing, is being destroyed right now as we speak, with the goal of doing that before a ceasefire may kick in. And the timing for that ceasefire is actually dependent on internal Israeli politics more than on anything else.
Now, you emphasize that genocide has nothing to do with numbers, but intent. In terms of intent, you mention people calling Palestinians human animals. Now, I have seen this term being used in Burma against the genocide of Rohingyas. Where did this human animal things come from? Who came up with this term, and why it tells you the intent?
Well, let me first say, it is not the genocide that's got nothing to do with numbers. Most interpretations of the Genocide Convention do call for also physical killing of people. The question is, what extent of physical killing? And one could say that when we reach such high numbers as we're seeing now in Gaza, again, not only of killing, destruction of people in a variety of ways, then you're coming closer and closer to the bar of genocide. So numbers matter, but it doesn't mean that the intent is to destroy everyone. The intent is to destroy the group as a group. Secondly, on your question on using dehumanizing language, that's extremely common as one of the preconditions of genocide, that you refer to the group that you want to destroy as not human, as something that you need to stamp out, as insidious, as not deserving the same rights, as not belonging to the sort of group of solidarity of humanity. You call them vermin, you call them cockroaches, you call them human animals. All of this terminology is used in order to create a sense in the population, among your soldiers, among your population, that those other people that are being targeted are not like us. You can call them, they're all rapists, they all come to kill us, they're all robbers and thieves. You generalize about a population, and that makes it, of course, easier then for those who are charged with carrying out the killings, and for other people who are the family members, who are just the population at large, to dismiss that as an attack on human beings. Now, where did the specific term human animals come from? In truth, I have no idea where they came up with that term from. I can say that it was not used very commonly in Israel before October 7th, but some terms that have been attributed to Hamas in particular were just as conducive to creating a sense of violence. So initially, after the Hamas attack, it was described in Israel as the equivalent of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS. That didn't have such a great effect. So the next term that was chosen was Nazis. And since then, that's the way that Hamas is being described in the Israeli media, as Nazis. Now, when you talk about Nazis in Israel in the context of a country that was established after the Holocaust as a sort of answer to the extermination of the Jews by Nazi Germany, when you say they're Nazis, and when your leaders say there are no uninvolved people in Gaza, then the conclusion that many people reach is that we have no choice but to destroy them. Because what do you do with Nazis? You have to destroy them all. So all this kind of terminology has a dehumanizing effect. There's an opposite side to this, which is also the use of euphemisms. So in order to make it easier for the population to digest these kind of atrocious actions, you talk about, say, humanitarian support, or now, as the Israeli defense minister declared, that the IDF will create a humanitarian city. And over the ruins of Rafah. That would not be a humanitarian city. It would be a concentration camp into which about 600,000 Palestinians are supposed to be pushed in, locked in. They can come in, but they cannot come out. So this use of euphemisms is yet another way of making the violence that everybody can see more acceptable to the population that is complicit in it.
So human animals or these type of terms are essentially used to dehumanize and make it easy for Israelis to accept the war and allow whatever is going on there. But there were references to Bible you mentioned in your article as a statement of intent. Are those references well known in Israel population, and they understood that that's what it is happening and that's what we need to do?
Yes, look, it's people have sort of wondered what did people like Netanyahu mean when they say remember Amalek, because not everyone is terribly well versed in the Old Testament. But in Israel, when you say that, when you say remember what Amalek did to you, everybody knows that the response in the Bible to Amalek, which is a sort of biblical people that attacked the Israelites when they were going from Egypt to the land of Canaan, the injunction by God was because they attacked you, they should be smitten. Their cattle and their sheep, their men and their women, their children and their infants, they should all be slaughtered. It's a genocidal order by God. Now, that's in the Bible, of course. We don't know if any of that ever happened. But what we do know is that for the Israeli public, when you say, remember what Amalek did to you, everybody knows. And for those who didn't know, shortly thereafter, a very powerful minister in Netanyahu's cabinet elaborated, Bezalel Smotrich, elaborated in a speech saying precisely, we should do to them as should have been done to Amalek. We should slaughter them. We should utter destruction of Gaza. So these are terms that are very evocative in Israel. They add to a particular atmosphere. And when they're uttered by people, this is not just, people on the street. This is your prime minister, your minister of defense, your finance minister. When they say that, these statements also have the effect of incitement on your troops. Israel mobilized at the time about 300,000 reserve soldiers. They hear their leaders, those are human animals, treat them like Amalek, the place should be destroyed, no one is uninvolved, the whole people is involved. That's what the president of the state said. Everyone there is involved. When they hear that and they go fully armed into this area, what do you expect them to do? They have been incited to act in a particular way.
Professor, you had one line, which in your article, referring to other people, that some people argue that the categorization of genocide should be entirely discarded. And you say because it often serves more to express outrage than to identify a particular crime. I mean, term genocide, taking out what is its actual terminology, what genocide treaty says, it is commonly used. People apply to in many, many situations. And then it does lose some of its importance in that way. So why do you argue that it is important to continue to use genocide term?
So look, I mean, I agree. And this is one reason that I also was reluctant to use it until I thought there was no other way of describing what we were seeing. Because, as I write, the term genocide, since it was coined, it was coined in 1944 by this Jewish-Polish lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, who himself lost most of his family in the Holocaust in Poland and ended up in the United States and was the main force behind the UN finally agreeing on the Genocide Convention. But he coined the term, and the term gained a particular meaning in popular culture, that because it's considered to be the crime of crimes, the worst crime that one can imagine, the attempt to destroy an entire people, an entire nation, an entire race, people use it as an expression of outrage. And when they see a massacre, when they see something horrible, they say, oh, this must be a genocide. But the UN Convention itself, the one that Lemkin helped bring about, defines that crime very clearly. And I think that discarding that term would be a major problem, because it's the only legal definition of a very particular crime. As I said before, not only of killing large numbers of people, which is bad enough, not only war crimes, but actually an attempt to destroy a group as a group, even not by killing most of its people, but by creating conditions that would make it no longer possible for that group to exist as such. Now, why do I use it now? I use it because all the signatory states of the Genocide Convention are duty-bound if they identify that a genocide is about to happen, to try and prevent it. If they see a genocide taking place, to do everything they can to stop it. And after it happens, to punish those who carried it out. That's part of, when you sign that convention as a state, you have taken up an obligation to act in this way. And that is a unique aspect of the Genocide Convention. You can apply that to states that are killing people within their own sovereign borders. That's the only international law that allows states to act against countries for actions that they're carrying out within their own sovereign borders, not only in international war. And states usually don't like that, because they worry that if one state can do it to another, it may happen to them too, that it can serve as an excuse for invasion. But in the case of genocide, that is allowed. And also because genocide, if it is recognized as such by the international community, which would mean by the International Court of Justice, can lead to severe sanctions on that state by the enforcement arm of the ICJ, which is the Security Council. It can lead to judicial proceedings against individuals through the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and it leaves a stain on the country, its politicians, its population, that does not go away, that remains for generations. So it is a very, very serious allegation, and one should take it seriously when trying to say, is this happening or not? And if you do, how do you act to stop it?
Well, thank you so much, Professor. We'll take a short break here. You're watching Mujahid Talk at Muslim Network TV. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Mujahid Talk at Muslim Network TV. We're talking with Professor of Genocide, who did not quite consider it to be a genocide until May 2024. Thank you, Professor, for your time. I mean, you have gone through in detail, quoting horrible statistics that an estimated 174,000 buildings, which constitute 70% of all structures in Gaza Strip, are either destroyed or damaged. And 58,000 people killed, including 17,000 children, 2,000 families have been completely wiped out, and 5,600 families have only one person surviving. Uh, these are extraordinary numbers. But why America doesn't know all of this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, one strange thing is that although the Israeli media, Israeli TV, if you watch the mainstream channels, you wouldn't know what kind of horror is happening in Gaza. Some media outlets in Israel, such as the Haaretz newspaper and another outlet known as Local Call, in English plus 972, have been doing extraordinary research and reporting on what's happening in Gaza. And most of these figures are openly available through these outlets, but they are rarely cited in the American media, in European media. They're very well documented, but they're rarely cited. And that's one of the main questions that I ask myself. And I have to say that I too was very happy when the New York Times finally published this op-ed, because it's so rare to see such figures being cited. And one has to understand how we reach that there is now, quite apart from the massive killing of human beings, there is an operation whereby we speak about a war happening in Gaza, but there is no war happening in Gaza. There's some guerrilla activity by small units, remaining units of Hamas, but most of what the IDF is engaged in, by its own admission, by multiple interviews that have been done with the reserve soldiers serving there, most of what they do is demolition. They're engaged in demolishing buildings, either doing it themselves through with tanks, with army bulldozers, with explosives, engineers blowing up buildings, or protecting civilians who are being brought from Israel. There are ads calling for operators of heavy machinery to come to Gaza to get well paid, and then they are paid by the house. They come in and they destroy houses. There have been many reports and interviews with such people on the ground, and hundreds of houses are being destroyed every week. This is not fighting against Hamas. This is a clear intent to simply flatten one city after another. Most of Gaza is not standing anymore. As I said, the only one that was half standing was Deir al-Balah, and that is now under attack by the IDF, and they have started demolition operations there too.
You mentioned in your conversation a little earlier that if you determine it's a genocide, there are certain implications. Now, in terms of Darfur, in terms of Rohingyas in Burma, that determination did take place. But what were the implications? I mean, it seems like it was nothing but word that, yeah, a genocide happened and these are the situation, and get over with it.
Well, this is, of course, the main problem. And in fact, the case of the Rohingya and now the case of Gaza, and I would add to that the criminal war that Russia is conducting against Ukraine, all these events that are happening without international sanction, or even being called that, and yet no one doing anything about it, the best way to demolish, to dismantle the regime of international law that was put into place after World War II, very much in response to the Holocaust and to other crimes carried out by the Nazi regime during the war. So if you go back to the Genocide Convention, you will see there needs to be sanctions. It doesn't say what they are, but clearly if the ICJ, which of course will take a long time to determine whether this is genocide or not, but if the ICJ issues provisional measures, which it did already in late 2024, and nobody does anything about it, if it goes to the Security Council, again, that's the enforcement agency, and the Security Council cannot issue any restrictions, any punishment on a country like Israel because the United States uses its veto power, then the entire apparatus that was put into place appears to be dysfunctional. So this is the main problem that we face, that all this system of international law depends on states. And some states have more power than other states, and they act according to what they perceive are their own interests. What do we do about it? What we can do about it is put pressure on our own states to act differently. As long as these states, at least some of them, are still democratic, and they pay attention to their own citizens' views because they want to be reelected, you can actually put pressure on your representatives to act differently. I think this is happening. I think public opinion, certainly regarding Israel in Europe and in the United States, has clearly changed according to most recent polls. The problem is that it hasn't filtered up, that the political elites in particular are not paying as much attention. And the pace at which it is going may be too slow to have much of an effect, but it will eventually change the political reality on the ground as well.
But Professor, don't you think it's often public opinion is different matter when it comes to public policy? Because in our country, public opinion and public policy, there's a big gap, which is fulfilled by lobbyings and special interest. An Israeli lobby, is there an alternate? Can anybody save anybody from that lobby to be able to take measures to stop? I mean, we're seeing, UN says that right now famine is at its fifth and the final stage.
Yeah.
I have seen photos since morning as I was preparing for conversation with you, and my heart sank. This is happening, and our media, you're saying, I mean, I went to Harrods as well this morning, and I see much more information there than the New York Times or the Washington Post or the CNN I looked at. So there is public opinion, definitely. But to translate into public policy, do you, as a scholar of genocide and Holocaust, discuss this, how to bridge gap between public opinion and public policy?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm a historian. I'm not a political scientist, and I'm not politically connected and engaged. And yes, you're right. You're right that responses are often very late, that public policy is affected by particular interests, that certainly in American political culture, maybe in more than in any other country that I know of in Europe, money plays an enormous role in politics. And that's a situation that's very hard to change, and it certainly won't change from one day to the next. But we have to admit that, and that takes us sort of beyond what is happening in Gaza, we have to admit that in Western democracies in particular, there has been a growing frustration with that system, that much of what we see, people may not be making the right choices, but they have become increasingly frustrated with the political elites that have come to dominate their countries, whether you speak of Germany or Britain or France or Italy or Spain, the Netherlands and the United States. They feel that these old political elites that always sold them, a bunch of promises and never quite delivered, where money plays a huge role, and the electorate often doesn't get anything out of that, have become increasingly frustrated. Unfortunately, people then may turn to all kind of populist politicians in rebellion against this kind of political establishment. So I don't know that people like me, people like you, can change that reality from one day to the next. I feel that what is important to do is at least confront whoever you can with the facts, tell them what they themselves have been complicit in, because the United States and thereby its own citizens are complicit in what is happening right now in Gaza. These bombs that are being dropped are made in America. The money that is coming to pay for that is coming from the American taxpayer, and the guilt, the burden of guilt, is also on those who are facilitating it. And if you can reach the public, I think at some point things change. I'll give you an example. During the war in the former Yugoslavia, it took about 2.5 years before public opinion, and it was public opinion in large part, finally kicked in and changed the policies of the United States and Western Europe vis-a-vis a genocide that was happening in their own backyard. It took a long time, but eventually there was intervention. The question is, obviously it does not bring back all those who died. Obviously it's late, but I think that, as the poet said, for us there is only the trying.
Professor, tell me, something occurs to me that, well, Netanyahu denies the Palestinian state and it's eliminating everyone, destroying all the buildings, and people are being forced, and nobody going to accept these people. Is Israel bulldozing its way to one-state solution with equal rights?
In the long run, if this continues, if Israel succeeds, if Israel is now exporting Gaza techniques to the West Bank, and there's growing ethnic cleansing on the West Bank as well. It's beginning in the periphery, in the more rural areas, and people are being pushed out of them into the cities. In the long run, if this continues, Israel will become a full-blown apartheid state. I don't see any other option. It will become an authoritarian state. It will become violent not only against occupied Palestinians and increasingly against Palestinian citizens of Israel, but also against its own Jewish citizens. There is already growing violence against anyone who disagrees with the government. The rule of law is diminishing by the day. The courts are playing along. The police is becoming increasingly a kind of militia for Ben Gvir, for the Minister of Internal Security. So if all this continues, what will that mean? It will mean that Israel, as a full-blown apartheid state, as an authoritarian state, I think will begin losing support from its main allies, because it won't be able to sell itself anymore as the only democracy in the Middle East and so forth. It will lose support from much of the Jewish diaspora, which will become increasingly embarrassed by being associated with it. It will also lead to an expansion of anti-Semitism, because Israel presents itself as a representative of Jews around the world, whether they agree with that or not. It doesn't care. And states like this, I think, don't have a long lease on life. So what will happen then? I may not be around by then, but I think that, yes, at that point, that state will implode. How will it implode? What does it mean? How much blood will be shed in the process? I don't know, but judging, say, by what happened in South Africa in 1994, I think it's possible that in the very long run, it will have to become a completely different state. A state that will have, as it does now, of course, 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians living side by side, but now one group is oppressed by the other. It will have to transform. But that will be a very long and very painful and very bloody process. And one hopes that that can be prevented, and that the political paradigm that is now ruling Israel, which is that we can confront this issue only with bombs. We can only bomb our way out of this conundrum of two peoples living in the same territory, that paradigm will change, and that Israel will be compelled by its allies, European and American, to seek a political way out of this.
Professor, do you see, I mean, in America, for America to improve its policy and translate public opinion into real action to stop this genocide, do you see there is a good enough of a debate in the Jewish American community?
Oh, no, it's terrible in the Jewish American community now. It's very hard. I think of what's happening now, especially in the Jewish community, is something akin to what happened in France during the Dreyfus trial. Families are turning on their own members. There are the tension, the fear, the rage, the inability to speak with each other. I've never seen it as bad, because there are, as you know, there are a lot of, especially in the young generation, there are a lot of young American Jews who are outraged by what they see Israel doing, and they feel, many of them were raised, to love Israel, to be pro-Zionist, to go on these trips to Israel, and suddenly they see that country engaged in something that they cannot condone in any way. And when they try to confront their communities, their parents, their rabbis, they often meet very strong resistance. As we saw last spring on university campuses, where many of those encampments, there were many Jewish students there on my campus and on many others, being completely discredited by the university administrations as anti-Semitic, attacks, and the police being sent in. So this is a very, very tough moment for American Jewry, I think. I don't know, I can't predict where it will go and how it will end, but I think that the process that started sometime in the 1960s of the sense among American Jews, large numbers of them, excluding the ultra-Orthodox, that they were Zionists in a kind of cultural identity sort of way, that to be a Jew in America, secular or somewhat a little bit traditional, meant that you were Zionist. I think this is falling apart now. And it's a very difficult process, because no one knows where is it heading. If not that, what are we? And there was always a fear among many Jews, I think, even young Jews. There was a sense that the state of Israel was a kind of safe haven, that we could always go there. If anti-Semitism began to pipe up, as it occasionally does, you had the safe haven. And that sense has been deeply eroded. And so it is a moment of crisis. It's well worth talking about it. I think this is not my forte. I came to this country from Israel, but yes, I think it's a very difficult moment for American Jews.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Omer Bartov. I know you're informed, you're a scholar, and good conversation. I hope we both contributed to people who are willing to learn and move forward based on knowledge and knowledge of history. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
This is Abdul Malik Mujahid. You're watching Mujahid Talk at Muslim Network TV. Please stay tuned for other programs. Thank you so much.